dealing with a bit of trigger thumb and worried about stress pain due to playing. So, yeah. Dang. Pain, it's something that, yeah, it's going to come up for all of us at some point, and you got to address it. Now, this question was prompted by, well, I shared this video playing this fingerstyle tune, and I was like, hey, what are some questions you have about fingerstyle guitar? A number of you just point blank were like, how? But there were some other ones, like something as fun as improvising with fingerstyle guitar, and something as challenging as comparison syndrome when it comes to like learning guitar, and we're going to talk about all of that, but first let's talk about pain on guitar. I know there's a lot of you out there that have more reason than playing guitar in their life to like have pain in their body, whether it's from like manual labor or injuries, whatever, and life has a way of leaving itself behind sometimes, and it can cause a lot of pain, but I'm here to tell you playing guitar doesn't need to cause you any pain. I know this is a touchy subject for folks, and I happen to know this to be true because I posted a video like a few weeks ago talking about stainless steel frets and how some folks who get them might be ignoring the real problem. And the problem being they might be squeezing too hard. If you're somebody who's getting the stainless steel fret because you're wearing out frets every few months to a year, the real problem isn't the fret, it's your technique. And the frets are resilient, yes, but our bodies, they're not, right? It's gonna catch up to you sooner or later. But we're talking about trigger finger or trigger thumb in his case, and honestly, I should not be prescribing any kind of advice about how to deal with like a medical condition, but I think there's stuff you can do. What I can prescribe is like preventative action, things you can do kind of to make sure like you don't get yourself into any further pain. The way I teach guitar is like it should be a lifetime thing, not just a pastime thing. I regularly hold my guitar for like 12 hours a day when I'm teaching lessons here, or 3 hours of just like nonstop music in a noisy bar, and that stuff will get to you if you're not paying attention to your body. As a folk musician, I do think we adhere to our own rules, meaning there really aren't any, right? Take this as a baseline. I know that, contorting your body and changing your body will change the sound and how you project the sound. And sometimes that's okay. That helps the music, that helps the art kind of come across the way you want it to. But you got to have a baseline to fall back into, like a state of equilibrium, of pain equilibrium, we'll say. So here are my thoughts on guitar technique. So to me, your right and left hand, they're kind of doing the same thing. What do I mean by that? So they're like upside down and backwards or something from each other, but if you look at the stance, like I put my guitar down, like my wrists are relatively flat, right? My hands are open about the same amount, like in their relaxed state. My thumb and my finger are like about the same distance away and in the same shape, right? The actions are very different, but just the way they stand, the way they hold themselves, it's like pretty much the same, right? Now, as far as like your right hand thumb, I have a little nail, but you can use a pick and it's the same thing, but you're just using the side of it. What you want to avoid too much is using the front of it like this, because you see what it does to my wrist? In the classical world, I think they like that, but we're doing the physical nature of folk and blues is a very different thing than classical, the way we have to project. Now, sometimes I do open my hand a little bit there and use kind of the front of my thumb a little bit because I do feel like I get more power. And when I want more power, it's nice to know I can get there. But I do notice that like after like too much of that, like a few songs or like an hour or something, my thumb knuckle definitely feels it. And so I'll have to back off then, right? And I'll go back to this more relaxed, more fluid motion. Something about the way your thumb moves like this versus like this. Like I do get more power and I get more nail, but I don't know why, but there's more tension there just from my experience. Now your left hand thumb, you don't use it as much as your right hand thumb, but you do use it for like an F chord. You got it for a D chord. You can use it for like certain bass lines. It's kind of more an inventive technique. But a lot of folks complain about pain in the beginning, right around here. And I think it's because people aren't supporting their fingers at all. Let me show you what I mean. So if you just hang your thumb and keep your hand open, your fingers have nothing to push against other than the strings and the guitar. and your thumb there is just like holding all the tension. What you got to do is actually support your fingers with the palm of your hand, and your hand is just kind of splat right up against the curvature of your neck. It's the same idea as like the classical technique where your thumb is in the middle of your neck, and again, your thumb is supporting your fingers. If you don't have any support for your fingers, you're going to over squeeze and wear out your frets. Yeah, you might wear out your frets. So one way to lighten up your touch, try this little exercise. It's a pretty commonly known exercise, but I've modified it, kind of evolved it a little bit to make, actually helps make your playing sound a little bit more musical too. Basically all it is you take this basic chord and strum it. I guess start by squeezing it really hard, and then slowly lighten up your hands until you don't hear anything but the open strings. And then push just past that. Now here's what I've done. Try to do that with every finger. You're not always ringing out every fret equally. Something you can do to practice that is try muting just one of these strings, right? Now I'm not pushing past it. I don't want to hear the note. But I don't want it to sound like a harmonic either, right? I have to push a little bit. Try that with my third finger. So you get these really percussive opportunities if you can do that with one finger at a time. So you can use this exercise as well to get mutes and really cool percussive things that you hear in a lot of blues playing. Probably the last thing I'm paying here is you probably don't want to sit in like a crippling, crumbly position, but we are folk musicians after all, so let's not get crazy. All right, so here's a question from over on Patreon. I would love to learn how to improvise a little with fingerstyle. Yeah. I still consider myself a new guitarist. I know all the open chords and bar chords. I've mostly stayed away from scales, and I know Travis picking patterns. Improvising for me comes down to finding a triad on the circle of fifths and Travis picking through it. That gets stale, and I'd love to learn how to pick out a melody. I assume this means learning scales. Kinda. I don't think scales equal improvising. They can, but I think improvising comes from a learned vocabulary, maybe learned styles. So if you learn a bunch of styles, let's just say jazz is a very easy one to talk about, right? You learn a bunch of jazz tunes, so you learn 50. You've probably internalized maybe 10% of the language if you learn like 50 jazz tunes, right? You sound 10% more like a jazz musician then. That is such a random number. Maybe it's more or maybe it's less, but you don't retain all of it, right? And so I think that's true of learning any guitar style. If you're into blues, make yourself learn 50 songs, which I know sounds like a lot, but just do it. Because those little licks, you're gonna learn less licks than songs, because a lot of songs utilize the same licks, right? You learn something like, or maybe something like, cool, I learned 2 things with this little chord that I didn't know you could do before. And you learn a bunch of stuff like that, right? And take note of the things you like. That's one way to learn how to improvise in general. With fingerstyle, something that really worked for me in the beginning was I would find a basic chord I liked, and I would get my thumb going like just on autopilot, and like maybe a little fingerstyle like pattern, and then I would try to just move my finger to different strings, right? And then I'd try another string. And I would just drone like that. And then I would try to make little ditties. I didn't move my hand, right? I just call these access notes. They're of a scale, you're right. I could play a scale that has those access notes inside of it. But I'm not thinking of a scale, right? I'm just literally thinking like it's a physical thing. I'm gonna move my hand around and then react to it in the moment. And that is what improvisation is. And all your chords have fun little things like that inside of them. All right, this last one is on comparison syndrome. Now, this was brought up to me. I was on a phone call with one of my patrons, and he brought this idea up as something that he was dealing with when learning guitar, was comparing himself to others, that he should be further along than he is. I feel like the advice you'd want me to give is don't compare yourself to others. But like most things, it's not like a simple answer like that, because I think comparing yourself to others can be a really, really important strategy for growth, and you just have to do it in like a really mindful way. Let me put it this way: the most productive times I've ever had as an artist is kind of balancing these two opposite approaches to learning guitar. On the one hand, I just have hyper-focused so much on the thing. It's like the rest of the world doesn't exist. I've missed out on so much pop culture and great movies and shows because I've just been literally stuck in my own universe learning some kind of musical thing. On the other hand, there are other times in my life where I've just immersed myself in the world and try to make myself as much a part of the world as I could and just soak it up like a sponge. You know, I went to a weird arts high school where you lived there, and it was one of the first times where I was around people from all around the state of Minnesota who like were so much better at their instruments than me. It was also the first time I had the realization that like, oh, noticing somebody else who's crushing it is good. It can be really good. Like if it's possible for them, it has to be possible for me too. You know, I don't know any musician out there who's like actually okay with where they're at as a musician, right? It's just not the reality. But you just know that you got to keep doing the work. And if you're doing the work and you're not okay with your progress, then you got to change something about your process. It's the best advice I could give. So if you like my little advices, let me know, and I'll do more of these. You can check out my last Q&A right here, and we will see you some old day.